All right, so how great was Oscar Robertson actually? See, what the freak did I just say? All right, so how great was Oscar Robertson actually? Now, I'm gonna try to answer that question in this video, but before I do, make sure you like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. I want to hit 530 subs soon. I'm at 526. I'm really close. I hope some people can subscribe. That being said, let's just get started. Now, first of all, let's talk about his physical attributes. This guy was 6'5", 205. Now he obviously ranged between 205 to maybe 215. I think at his heaviest might have been 220, but he was a big guard, 6'5". You know, he was a big point guard. You know, but one of the things that stands out about Oscar Robertson, and in terms of how great he is how all around of a player he was, and especially offensively. You know, I mean, just looking at his stats, and I'll show you some footage in a little bit, but he was a great scorer. He was one of the best scorers in his era, right? One of the best scorers ever, if we're being honest. He's one of the best playmakers ever, if not the best playmaker ever. One of the best passers ever in that manner, too. And then rebounding wise, he's one of the best rebounding guards ever, if not the best. Maybe I wouldn't say the best. I mean, I think there's a couple guys you can name, like Westbrook technically would have to take the edge over him in theory, but he is one of the best. And then on top of that, he was extremely efficient. I mean, for a guard in the 60s to be able to shoot 47% your rookie year and never drop below that until you're the age of 34, to me is mind-boggling. Because if you do any research, you'll know very quickly why I say that. The 60s was not easy to shoot a high percentage because the paint was clogged, and most of the time, players could really play defense. Right? They were allowed to play defense, so it was hard to get shots off. So the fact that he shot that type of efficiency with the playmaking and the scoring, everything combined is just amazing. Now, I'll get deeper into every single one of these things, but before I do, I wanted to show you some highlights of him. Now, let me find the clip. This is one of my favorite clips of all time right here. Check this out. Well, first of all, it's freak athlete. But right here, if I didn't tell you this was the 60s, you would not be able to tell this was the 60s. Like, you would think this is the 80s. You know what I mean? Take the ball up court. You have a pretty athletic, very athletic center in Bill Russell. Throw it down, dunk. Obviously, the rebounding. But one thing he had, obviously, he could run the break, which is something I want to talk about in a little bit because I'm going to bring up another player. But he was an elite rebounder, right? And he could really pass. He could really shoot, you know, really shoot. Like, I'm not playing when I tell people he could really shoot and really pass. Look at this. That's an elite shooter. Now, his pull-up jumper was not as nice as Jerry West, I will admit, but he was just as efficient, in my opinion. From what I've seen, he was just as an efficient um, shooter as Jerry West. But it's just crazy to say. But one of the things he also did good was he knew how to use the post up. So he would post up and shoot the fadeaway. You know, kind of like, I guess he would be the precursor of Michael Jordan in terms of that as well. Technically, Jerry would also be that, but Jerry was more pull-up jumper, in my opinion. Now, Oscar, the interesting thing about Oscar, and I said this earlier, that he was so all-around offensively, is most people don't realize he averaged over 30 points a game 6 times in his career. Wait, I apologize. 7 times in his, well, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 times in his career. A couple years he was really close from averaging 30 as well. And some of these years, he was top 2 in scoring, only behind Wilt or only behind Elgin Baylor. So he would have led the league in scoring maybe 4 or 5 times if it wasn't for Wilt and Rick Barry and Elgin Baylor having some ridiculous years. Which is crazy to think about because in theory he would have led the league. He would have been the only player. I think he is the only. Well, no, not anymore. But he would have been the only player in NBA history to lead the league in scoring like 5 times and assists 5 times or something ridiculous like that. And obviously, I'm going to dive into the assists. But before I do, the scoring, the thing that I want to point out again is um, in the playoffs, he definitely struggled more in the playoffs. But part of that is because he played such great defensive teams in terms of every year he ran into either Wilt or Bill Russell. Right, every year in the playoffs, it seemed like that's just like the worst luck in the history of the world. And the times that he didn't run into Wilt, and he was already too old. As you can see, most of his career playoff games came with Milwaukee with 47, which was at the end of his career. So when you're looking at his stats, always remember that in the playoffs, his stats are not going to look as good because most of his games came from way after his prime. You know, they came with the Milwaukee Bucks. But like I said, let me go back to the scoring regular season wise. This dude's efficiency was ridiculous. He was actually the most efficient player of the 60s with a true shooting percentage of like 56 and a true TS plus of like 117 at his peak, which is mind-boggling. Like that is, I don't want to get too complicated with the advanced stats, but that is extremely efficient scoring in my opinion. It's just He's one of the most underrated scorers ever because he played in the 60s, so people just adjust his stats, even though that's ridiculous. But forget the scoring. Well, actually, don't forget the scoring and I'll get back to the scoring in a bit, but let's talk about his assist. Now, if you look at his assist, it's incredible. 9.7, 11.4, 11, 11.5, 11.1, 9.7, 9.8. Led the league in assists a bunch of years. Averaged over 10 assists for a lot of years. Obviously, the triple-double in 62. But one of the things that's so impressive about Oscar is that in the 60s, they didn't give assists like they do today. And Oscar Robertson talked about this as well.
To play basketball,
check this out.
The assist had to be going to someone who went directly to the basket. I couldn't throw the ball back out to anyone in the corner. We had a jump shot, and that was not an assist in that particular time.
Now think about that. And that's true, by the way. The stats, footage, all shows that. When you look at the assists of the players in the 60s, just realize that it's more impressive than you think. But so when you look at this 11.4, for example, in 62, the year he averaged the triple-double, he probably averaged 13, 14 assists. Same thing with this year, 11.5. He probably averaged 13, 14, 15 assists, which sounds like a lot. It is a lot, by the way. That's insane. Now, especially when you consider he was averaging 30 in both of those years, but it's very likely just because of the way the era was. And when I mean true assist, I'm talking about assists that he didn't get credit for. So if he drove and kicked it out and he didn't get an assist because his teammate took a jump shot or took a dribble and then a jump shot or a pump fake and then a jump shot, you wouldn't get an assist for that. So it's very impressive to me. I just don't see how people can't wrap their heads around that. Now, I'm pointing this out for a reason, but before I do, I got to talk about his rebounding. His rebounding, in my opinion, he's one of the best rebounding guards in NBA history, and I think that's pretty clear. There are other players you could argue over him, like Russell Westbrook, but he is one of the best no matter what. And another thing that I want to point out is defensively, I don't believe he was the best, but he definitely was smart. So if you watch the footage, he always seemed to be there with his hands, ready to get a steal. He always seemed to be in the right spot. I just don't think he had the same gift for defense as Jerry West. So I to be honest with you, defensively he wasn't the best. But if you consider and rank him near the point guards, it's not a problem because he would be number one either way in terms of the top 3 point guards ever. Now, why am I talking about other point guards? Well, in terms of how great he was, we got to establish how great of a point guard he was before we can rank him overall. So in terms of point guards, in my opinion, there's really only 2, but I'll give you 3 just because I know people will get upset if I don't mention the other guy. But the 3 best point guards ever are Oscar, Magic, and Stephen Curry. Now, a lot of people choose Magic Johnson because he has 5 rings, he has 3 MVPs, he has a couple Finals MVPs. He was elite, he was dominant in the 80s, and we have more footage of him. Now, if you were to ask the people who played with both, like Kareem has very, very boldly stated that Oscar was a better player than Magic. I mean, he said it. He backtracked because he got slack for it, but he said it, and that's just the reality. You can't take that away. But Oscar, as good as he was, here's the reality of it. He did not win as many rings. But here's where it gets even more interesting. He played in the 60s. But remember when I said that he could run the fast break? And he knew how to pass the ball in the fast break, which I guess I could talk more about his game in a minute, but that style of play was popular in the 60s, and he could do it. In the 80s, when the Showtime Lakers were running the NBA and Magic had all the teammates in the world anybody could ask for, you could replace Magic with Oscar, and they would be just as successful. And in my own personal opinion, he would have won more rings and more MVPs than Magic did if he played with the Lakers. The reason I say this is he did not have that type of help in the 60s, and he played much better teams than Magic did in the 80s, which sounds complicated because the Bird Celtics were insanely good, but the Bill Russell Celtics were better, and so were the 77 or the 67 Sixers to be specific, and the 72 Lakers for that matter. But anyways, like I was saying, he would be able to play in that role and elevate the team more because he was a more complete offensive player than Magic. Now, Magic could score. And trust me, if Magic only wanted to score, Magic could have averaged 25, 26, 28, maybe even 30 points per game. I wouldn't doubt it personally, right? Not saying that he would necessarily, but I wouldn't doubt it if someone told me that. But Oscar definitely could do it, and he did it more than, he averaged 36 times in his career. You know what I mean? And he was extremely efficient while doing it. So if you put him on that Lakers team, his assists are going to skyrocket. He's going to average 12 assists every year, no matter what. Right? But he's going to get you 28 or 26 or 30 on hyper efficiency, right? Because he knows how to play the game. He's a much better scorer than Magic, in my opinion. I think he's a better shooter. I know Magic led the league in free throw percentage, shooting 90% one time in his career. So if you want to argue that that's the reason Magic would be a better shooter, I don't know. You don't really have a ground to stand on, in my opinion. But I mean, if you want to try, I mean, he shot 91% one year and then 90 another. So Magic really improved on his free throws throughout his career. But Oscar was there already, and his form was a little weird, but it worked for his jump shot. Which I think if you watch some footage, you'll notice that when he shoots, that form that he had was part of the reason he was so good. Obviously, the passing. Right, I think this is where. Look at that. Just the incredible passing, bro. Just always like his timing was perfect. That's a beautiful shot by Kareem. You know, running the break. This is old man Oscar, right? Looking for the right pass. He's just a high IQ player, knew how to make the right passes. Was not as flashy as Magic, to be honest with you, but I would rather have a point guard who was better. And one thing about Oscar that I forgot to mention, and people have done the research on this, Oscar was really good at protecting the ball. Like when I mean really good, he was really good at protecting the ball. He very rarely turned it over. You know, if I remember correctly, out of like a couple hundred possessions that they had tracked, he had like a turnover rate of less than 8%, right? Which, if you don't know how good that is, that's Michael Jordan level efficiency in terms of turnover ratio. Which, if for those who don't know, that's like the best ever in terms of like not turning the ball over. I believe that's correct. Where is it? Advance. Yeah, he was like 8%. He was like better than Michael Jordan, and he was a primary passer, bro. And he averaged over 10 assists. So the fact that he can do that and protect the ball, I don't see how anybody comes close to him as a point guard. Now, I get it, Magic, favoritism. If you like Magic more, that's cool. I don't have a problem with it. But me personally, I would rather have Oscar Robertson as my point guard. And that being said, how great is he overall? I think he is easily top 10 ever. Where do you rank him? I think it just depends. If you like big man more, you're probably going to have him closer to 10 like me. But if you like guards more, you're going to have him closer to top 5. And if you told me that he was the best player ever, I would disagree because I have my own opinions, but I wouldn't call you crazy. And so I hope that answers the question of how great Oscar was. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. Give me a second. For those wondering, even though he played in the 60s, he was an athlete, and he could really jump. And he was pretty fast, too. So, yeah, if you don't think this dude could play in the NBA today, you're delusional. He would be the best player in the world in the NBA today, and it wouldn't be close. That's it. God bless you. Jesus loves you. I hope you guys get saved. Thank you guys for watching. Goodbye.